Hi, Psalm 105, 1 through 2 says, "Give praise to the Lord, proclaim his name, make known among the nations what he has done. Sing to him, sing praise to him, tell of his wonderful acts." Tell of his wonderful acts. You know, when we share what God has done with and in our lives, we're actually worshiping him. Shared stories and testimonies of God's goodness and faithfulness and power are acts of worship and a powerful component to our collective praise to him as his people. That includes the parts of our story that are filled with victory and joy, but it also includes the parts of our stories we don't fully understand. The parts that still seem like a mystery, the parts of our stories that might even be painful or difficult. God can use every part of our story to bring glory to himself. He is the author and finisher of the stories of our lives, and we can trust God with the redemptive details as he's working all things out for our good and his glory. Welcome to another Tell Me More Sunday. You know, God has been and is at work in the lives of people right here at Compass in powerful ways. And we want to share just a few stories as we make known what he has done and tell of his wonderful acts. You know, we've just finished a series here at Compass called Entrusted. In that series, we discovered that God owns every component of our lives, like our talents, our abilities, our money, our possessions, our relationships, and our time. But he chooses to partner with us. God entrusts us to steward some really sacred things that he's placed in our lives in ways that honor him and display his love to the world. Well, today we're going to hear 4 stories of stewardship in the lives of people right here from Compass. And it's our prayer that their stories will inspire you and maybe even help guide you as you seek to steward the blessings God's placed in your life. Above all, that these stories would bring glory to our amazing God. So sit back, relax, and let's get started as we say, hey, tell me more. Hey, I'm here with Tim Bauman. Tim, thanks for joining us and having a conversation. Why don't you introduce yourself, maybe how long you've been at Compass and a little bit about your family.
Well, Wendy and I started coming to the church in January of 1989. It was a month after we were married. I worked at over on Sea Line at a company called Johnson Controls. I was an engineer there. So we just started shopping for a church, and our first stop was Zina Street, and Fitchett had just started then in January. And we never went anywhere else. We've never been to another church over the past, 37 years or whatever it is. Then about a year or two later, started Interstate Batteries in August of 1990. And we have 2 boys, Kyle and Luke. They grew up in the church. Luke and his wife Avery live in town, and they still serve and go here. And then Kyle and his wife live in Guelph.
We've been in this series called Entrusted, where we have been talking about the idea, the concept of stewardship. And as you said, you manage a company. How does being a follower of Jesus kind of influence or flavor your approach to running a business of that magnitude?
That's a good question, and it's a challenge. Interstate Batteries' corporate mission statement, if I can rhyme it off here, is to glorify God and enrich lives as we deliver the most trustworthy power source in the world. Wow. So that's our objective, is to honor and glorify God. And whether you preach on a Sunday morning or whether you sell batteries Monday to Friday, I think we all play, a small part in building the kingdom and being a part of the body. And so that's our approach.
How does that transfer to like everyday life of dealing with customers?
I think one of the primary ways we look at it is investing into our people. We have, folks in our organization and our team that have marital issues, that, deal with health issues, cancer, mental illness, heart disease. So you walk through some deep situations away from work, and people bring those things to the office or the warehouse every day. I'm a very task-oriented person and very head down busy And sometimes you have to step back, take a deep breath, and say, okay, I need to sit and listen, and I need to spend time and understand, and even in some cases pray with folks as they walk through these situations. The other way is just your resources. Again, coming back to stewardship and just having an understanding that every good gift comes from above. So making sure that you are as generous as you can be with your finances and your resources, and helping to support organizations, community things as much as possible.
I want to ask you, Tim, I'm assuming with business, whatever arena of life, it's much easier to follow the Lord during the mountaintops, during the highs. But during those lows, those dips, those times when the business maybe isn't doing as well, how do you press into the Lord in those seasons?
The foundation was set right out of the gate. I was very young, actually going through university, and I had a desire at that point to get into my own business. And I had a good friend, mentor, actually helped out in the youth, one of our youth leaders, and we spent a fair bit of time together and had intentional prayer times, usually on Sunday nights. And so that was part of an intentional prayer that I had probably early in my 20s.
Wow.
My father-in-law, Wendy's dad, was a retired U.S. Air Force pilot and went to Dallas Seminary in Dallas, Texas. He worked part-time for Interstate Batteries. Oh. We went to the graduation for Dallas Seminary, and the president of Interstate Batteries was on the board and therefore was at the graduation. And so he introduced me to Norm Miller and said, well, Tim would love to be a distributor for you up in Canada. And I thought, offhanded comment, where's that gonna go, right? Slash forward a year or two later, he called and said, he wanted to see if you're still interested in getting into the battery business. So I shared that because for me, that's always been, I guess, what I call my out of Egypt, or kind of crossing the Red Sea. God told the Israelites to look back at that moment when they were in the wilderness, going through those difficult times. To me, that's foundational. Knowing that God got me into this and He's going to continue to walk with me through it.
Ultimately, God has given you this business to manage on His behalf. But it's His business, it's His money, it's His. How do you navigate the ownership of not taking that burden on, but giving it back?
A continual process. I think that's the way it is with life in general. Our kids, our family,
good point.
Our business, and I'm continually saying, Lord, I give everything and everyone to you. Surrendering on an ongoing, continual basis.
Right, so it's not a one and out. That's
no,
every day.
Definitely not. I'm a very I guess, take charge and I can do this.
Sure.
And I grip things. I wouldn't be a great hockey player because I'm gripping my stick way too tight. That's the challenge side of being in business, is you want to control, and more as we look around us, the ability to control and the amount of uncertainty in our world is crazy.
Yeah. When
I was younger, I feel as though I had more of a childlike faith and a dependency on the Lord, and I would be quick to take things to prayer because I didn't know. But as you move along, you get some success. You have the fruits of your labor, and I think subtly, my faith shifted from looking to God to trusting in my own abilities.
Oh, that's
and
good.
What I
it's
can
harder
do.
The more successful
Yeah,
you get.
I think so. So 12, 13 years ago, I kind of hit a wall and went through some challenges. And I think the journey since then has been reestablishing my focus on the Lord. Our hope, I don't think, is in the fact that God does a bunch of stuff for us or with us. That's more evidence of our hope. In John 15:4, it says, abide in me and I in you. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So for me, that abiding or remaining is another way to say it, a deep union with the Lord. I think as I've gone through the past 35 years, that would be, my advice is make sure that your relationship with the Lord is your foundation and your hope. Circumstances are out here and they're always swirling, and don't get me wrong, I deal with anxious thoughts all the time.
Sure.
and that kind of thing, but ultimately we got to come back to our relationship and our foundation, and whatever that means. For me, it's slow down, be still, what we talked about, continually releasing, spending quality time in His Word, praying Scripture, meditating, and focusing in on His Word.
Well, thank you, Tim, for sharing your story and being a part of our Tell Me More Sunday. So appreciated. I know it's going to bless so many people, and thank you just for the gift that you are to our church. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thanks, Jay.
Well, I am here with my friend Pat Vallier. Pat, thank you so much for sitting down and having a conversation with me today. Could you tell us a little bit maybe about yourself? How long have you been like a follower of Christ, and has faith been a part of your life?
The faith part in Jesus Christ came when we came here. We've always gone to church. We've always believed there was God and Jesus and everything, but I was not a follower of Jesus Christ. He wasn't part of my life. And then we had some really serious things happen in our life that didn't know if I was going to get through it or not. And one of them was losing our son. And the Lord, I felt Him touch me in some ways, said, I know how you feel. I've lost a son too.
Wow.
And that was my following.
That was
mine. I have this special relationship, and it's been beautiful ever since. Everything I do, I turn to the Lord.
So we've just finished a series here at Compass called Entrusted, where we have been talking about stewardship. And God has given you a very important ministry to steward called Victory House. For those who don't know anything about Victory House, why don't you tell us?
10 years ago, I was asked by Compass to go to a Bible study at Calden Hills in Calden East. And when I was there, I was introduced to a program that was coming from Heritage College. It was a ladies follow, like a whole year you had to take it. And I thought, I can't do this. This is the wrong time in my life, financially, time-wise, etc. But I took it because I felt God calling me to do that. During that time, Compass had called me and asked me to pick up a few women coming from the shelter in town.
Okay.
And so I'd pick them up, bring them here. I was more than happy to do it, of course, and pray with them. But I realized that the amount of time they're in this shelter is not enough time for them to heal. So we did a couple of dinners. We had some lunches for these ladies and bought them some gifts. And I had a group of my Compass women, and we just did some things like that and saw how much these ladies so appreciated the love and
just
the
by
care.
loving on them.
By loving on them. And so the last part of my time at Heritage, we had to do a field practicum, it was called. So we had to get a group of people together and decide what we were going to do.
Right.
I decided that through prayer, that I would do something as a shelter after the shelter, if you want to call it, so that I could bring the ladies to us and we would love them and care for them and work with them.
Just on a longer term kind of basis?
Longer term, but looking at it differently. Like, get them to the next step in life, especially if they've been mistreated and hurt. That anger is there, the hurt is there, the fear is there. And I felt at the time God saying, I just want you to love them. Because I kept saying, I don't know anything about this. What am I going to do? But I knew God did.
Yeah.
I knew He had the experience. I knew He knew what He wanted. I knew it was His goal, not my goal. Because I said it was the wrong time in my life, totally, but became the right time.
How did you, in that journey, God obviously captured your heart for these women and for this yes. cause. When and how did you know, God's calling me to actually start something very real and practical, and kind of how Victory House was birthed?
Pastor Andrew was part and parcel of my setup in the beginning, because I went to him, said, am I crazy? Is this something I should be looking at? Will it pass?
Sure.
And he gave me a name, who gave me a name of another person who already set up a shelter. Went and looked and said, this is it.
We can do this.
We can do this. We can do this. And I knew that the lady that was there was totally sent from the Lord. And I knew that that's what we needed. It's not mine. So, I mean, Jay, on all my prayers, constantly I would say, Father, if this is not what you want us to do, then shut the door. Tell me to shut the door.
And He kept opening the doors.
Opening and opening. Opening and opening, yes.
Wow. And how long has Victory House been operating now?
It's been operating for 10 years now. We really didn't get started at first. We were doing fundraisers
Sure.
and banquets and things like this because I felt we needed to raise some money, right? And we also looked at a place over in Caledon East. They had a large building there, and I thought, we can renovate this. In the meantime, we took over the lower level of a house that's on the same property, renovated it with all donations and furniture and everything else, help, work, everything, and made it into a 2-bedroom apartment. And that's what we've been operating with from the last 2 years. And we've had 10 women and their daughters in there.
Amazing. Wow. As a follower of Jesus, as a Christian in a leadership role running a ministry like Victory House, how does your faith connect with your leadership? In the day-to-day kind of details of
Prayer, constant prayer. Prayer in the morning, pray before we go in, pray with the ladies, pray after the ladies. When we don't have an answer, we turn to prayer.
Wow.
With my team that's there constantly. And if I don't remember to do it, one of them do. Can we just take this to prayer? Can we just take this to God? When COVID hit, I thought, what are we going to do now? We can't do fundraisers. How are we going to do this? I was driving down Highway 10 and went past this building, and I looked and I thought, oh, for lease on this old blacksmith building, as a matter of fact, in the village of Caledon. And so I went in and looked at it, and I thought, oh, I'm to do a store now. So I took my board. I had a board of directors, and I took my board there and said, what do you think? And all of us said instantly, yeah, this is it. So that store, plus a little store we took over the year later, became our funding for it. We have all kinds of things. So that whole enterprise is what's funding.
So amazing how God, he calls us into things, but then he provides and makes a way to maintain and to thrive in ministry. That's amazing. If there was somebody hearing your story of what God has done and in your life and how he's entrusted you to steward this ministry, if there's somebody that is maybe sensing that maybe God is calling me into a specific ministry or entrusting me with something, what would your advice be for somebody maybe still wrestling with that part of the journey, at the very beginning, like, is this you, Lord? And
ask God to show you. I mean, don't go about it with all your own, because if you're doing it, you're doing your own thing. You're not doing what God's asking you to do. So it's meant so much to me to confirm that. Constant prayer with myself and prayer with our team. Like I said, if we get into a difficult situation, something that we're not sure what to do, one of us will say, let's take it to the Lord. Let's talk to the Father.
So exciting to hear how God has worked in your journey, to hear the incredible work he's doing through Victory House. I'm just so grateful to have you as a part of our church.
Thank you,
And thank you for sharing your story today, Pat. Appreciate
Thank you. Oh, that's great. Thank you for having me here and that we're able to now share it with our community and my home church.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Hey, I'm so thrilled to be joined by Ryan Grist. Ryan, thanks for being here on our Tell Me More Sunday. Would you share, Ryan, a little bit about how long you've been at Compass, maybe about your family, maybe some of your faith journey?
I'm married to Natalie, and I have 2 kids, Wesley and Sophie. We've been coming to Compass probably for 16 or 17 years.
Wow, it's been that long, eh?
Yeah, yeah. As I moved in through high school and college and stuff, I didn't have the foundation that my kids have, and I'm so grateful for, with things like the youth group and Compass camps and all of those things that have been really meaningful for them. So I was still sort of seeking, but I was seeking in different places like that weren't bearing much fruit. So I was just sort of wandering, really.
Sure.
Just trying to figure it out. As I started diving deeper into the spiritual world of Christianity, it was like,
Well, this preconceived kind of notions that you've been fed.
like,
just kind
oh
of,
wow, that's not
yeah.
it's not that at all. Yeah. What brought me to Compass in Orangeville Baptist at that time was the disproportionate amount of outstanding kids that came through the ODSS jazz band. I studied jazz performance at Humber, jazz saxophone, and I got a call from the high school music teacher that said, we don't have anybody to run the jazz band, it's probably gonna fold. Do you know anybody that might be willing to come and do the band? And I was like, well, no, I'm not qualified. But I couldn't reconcile the band not existing. So I was like, well, I guess I'll come and I'll do it until I'll just do it until somebody shows up that can run it. 20 years later, The current teacher took it over. But during that time, I would just get these outstanding kids. And I was just, inevitably, I'd find out that they sort of came out of the youth program at Ridgeville Baptist Church. And I was like, wow, I'm
gonna go check that place out, and there's something there.
Yeah, and when Wes was born, we weren't attending anywhere regularly, but when Wes was born, when we were having kids, it became important to me to have a home.
So that's what drew you here, and then your own journey with Jesus just kind of
so we
grew from there.
We came here, and then the music was great. We joined a home group and made some wonderful friends, and that was such a meaningful thing for us because we were feeling our peer group was going one way, and
here was a community that lined up with your beliefs and your values and all the...
Exactly, and it made it like a family.
We're having a conversation today around this whole idea of stewardship. And we've already touched on music. And for those that know you, God has entrusted you as a steward over this musical gift.
I never felt like it was like supernatural power to play the saxophone. It was just like, wow, I can just do this. I think more that the blessing or the gift that I was given was the desire to do it. It takes a lot, and it's work. It's work, and it's diligent practice. People always laugh when I say I tried to quit playing. It'd just be way easier if I wasn't a musician, right? I seriously tried, because it was so hard to maintain how I wanted to sound and what I wanted to feel, and where could I play? Where would people see value in this, and how? And then this was an album. Like, this is John Coltrane, who is just like a classic legendary saxophone jazz guy. I opened this up, the liner notes, these actual liner notes, and the first thing that I read was, "All praise to God, to whom all praise is due." And I was like, wait, what? Let us pursue him in the righteous path. And I'm just like, so this whole album, it's called A Love Supreme. It was his whole spiritual seeking
birthed
of God,
out of his relationship with
how
God.
it came through him, so it gave permission almost for me to put music in a spiritual context, which is where I felt it lived anyway, but was sort of trying to do it myself and intellectualize it instead of.
There's a bigger purpose here for it than just the notes.
Yeah. That led me to a guy that I really use he's my blueprint really, is Kirk Whalum. He's fantastic. And he wrote a bunch of these. He has 3 CDs, Gospel According to Jazz. He grew up in the church, and then he was trying to play like a gospel singer would sing and push the message. And then it was just like, oh, this is amazing. Like, this is it. This is where it really is. And then when I was able to finally join the worship team and play in that context, that was it was a real shift. And I'm forever grateful to Compass for just having me.
Making space for
a saxophonist, because it's in contemporary Christian music, there's not a lot of horns.
How does faith intersect, your faith and your journey with Christ intersect with kind of this gift, musical gift that you have and that you're passionate about?
Well, it's his breath in our lungs. You know, when I'm playing, I'm trying to get myself out of the way. Where it intersects for me, what I'm really trying to do is be diligent in my practice, develop my craft, my skill on the instrument, so that really I can just be a conduit. Really, it's an offering. I really want it.
Bigger than yourself, it's an offering. Have you had moments you just knew that God was playing through you, as it were?
There's been times where I've played and I've just thought to myself, like, oh, boy, did I ever miss today. Like, I just missed the mark.
I wasn't on yet.
Someone will approach me with tears in their eyes saying to me, like, that was so beautiful. It was so moving. Like, thank you. And I'm like,
there's something beyond me that was at work here. There's
a
dynamic.
And it's a little bit humbling. Well, it's a lot humbling to think like, oh, I thought I actually had control over how that was gonna be used. I don't think so.
If there was a person who maybe there's a gift that they've been given to be entrusted, it might be music or art, something in the arts. It could be in the field of athletics or business, but God has gifted them specifically with something He's asking them to steward. What might be just a word of advice or encouragement?
Be fearless with it. I've been so lucky to have like the retreat in daily life. I've sort of dove into that a little bit, and then I've had like spiritual direction practice, and there's so much in Scripture about courage, like being courageous and stepping out and moving forward, and figure out how to have your sense of identity in Christ so that you're not as affected by the feedback you may or may not get.
Right.
Because
that's what makes you brave, is your identity is in Christ, not whether I succeed or
because
if people like me or like it.
Yeah.
God's given you this step into it.
Be brave and develop it, and don't be impatient. Like it's a journey, it's a process. Seek the process of learning and discovering, and just going as deep as you can into the thing. Like develop a sense of curiosity and wonder how this thing works.
That's good. Amazing. Well, thanks, Ray. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for sharing
pleasure.
a little bit of your story with us. We appreciate you so much and your family, and it's been awesome to sit down with you.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Well, I am here with Ryan and Michelle Passmore, part of our Compass family. Thanks for being here, guys.
For sure.
Thanks for joining me for a conversation. I know you guys, not everybody does. Tell the nice folks a little bit about the Passmores.
Well, I'm Ryan, and this is Michelle.
We have a daughter named Monica who's 21. We've been in the Orangeville area for about 25 years now.
We've just come through a series called Entrusted, where we have been talking about stewardship. And you guys have a really special stewardship story in terms of parenting. God has handpicked you guys to parent a daughter with some really specific challenges, physical challenges. For those that don't know Monica and her story, tell us a little bit about that journey.
When Monica was born, we were told that she had a diagnosis of 22q11 microdeletion syndrome. And
of course she did.
Of course she did. And that big long word just means that there was a tiny little piece of a chromosome missing. So Monica was born with a congenital heart defect called truncus arteriosus, which essentially means that she wasn't born with a pulmonary artery. We knew right away that heart surgery was going to be needed for her. Our first experience was her first open heart surgery when she was 1 month old on the day.
Oh, gosh.
And when the surgeon did come out, he was concerned. He kept saying, she's very sick, she's very sick. And they were confused and baffled, just things weren't quite right. They decided to go back in to do more surgery and discovered that when she was in utero, her heart had formed extra arteries to compensate for that one that was missing. And so they knew that they had to deal with that. They dealt with that a little bit through surgery. We had a lot of support from family and friends and our church family at the time. And it was quite a shock to new life as parents.
I was going to ask you, when you first got that diagnosis, what were those initial, do you remember those initial feelings?
It was a challenge to kind of take it all in, because this was a syndrome that had many different facets to it, and there were many unknowns. And so it was just a lot of waiting and a lot of big words that we had to figure out, and a lot of different people walking in the room. So it was a challenge.
So over the years, I mean, that was the beginning of the journey, but it was only the beginning.
It was only
of
the
journey.
beginning.
What kind of did life look like from a health perspective for Monica and your family?
For
after
sure.
that?
We've had moments, when I say moments, I mean like kind of years in between major incidences. She had another open heart surgery when she was 2 years old. That one was fairly uneventful, and just before Monica turned 8 years old, she became very sick one day, thought it was kind of flu symptoms. Didn't really think much about it, and then she became non-responsive and knew something was different. Took her to the local hospital. They were concerned. They sent her right away to sick kids, given her medical history. And she was, after many tests, diagnosed with endocarditis, which is infection in the heart valves and lining of the heart. Very serious infection. That night before the surgery, when the surgeon had to go over all the risks with us as we've been through before, and as was typical, it felt different. We could tell that he was nervous. I don't know if nervous is even the right word, but there was just something different about that meeting. And I remember Ryan talking to him and saying, "We know your hands are on our daughters, but God's hands are also on hers." And he was very quiet, but I hope he heard that, took it in. It was quite likely she wouldn't make it through surgery, and that if she did, he would be very concerned about organ failure on the other side of surgery, possible brain damage. And so we had people around the world praying for Monica. Monica pulled through surgery. And I remember very clearly the only words that came out of the surgeon's mouth when he walked into her critical care room was amazing. It's just amazing. It's amazing. And I can picture him shaking his head, just shaking it. It's amazing. And it was miraculous that she came through that surgery. She recovered, she regained her strength. I remember the first day coming back to church after that and just feeling the love of the church family. So many people had been praying, and those people still are praying for her, which is such an encouragement when I have someone who I don't talk to very often, but come up and pop up to me and say, "How's Monica doing? I've been praying for her. What else can I pray for?" Amazing. And that's been pretty amazing.
Does parenting, have you always viewed that as a calling? The Lord specifically chose you guys to do? And if so, have you ever had moments where you've said, "Us, Lord, do you have the right people?"
I mean, it was our first child, so
Sure.
buying organic food and locally sourced, ingredients, things like that.
Do everything right. Yeah.
Do everything we could, and when I'd said that, I said, was it something, is something genetic with us, or whatever? Was it something we did? He says, "It's just the hand you were dealt." So that always stuck with me.
The word fluke.
The fluke, but I mean, obviously, with our perspective, it's not a fluke. It's nothing takes the Lord by surprise.
We've never really questioned why this has been placed on us. It's really been God-granted peace that we are Monica's parents, and we know that He is sovereign. You can pray for healing. You can pray that complete healing happens. But I always go back to that story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire, and King Nebuchadnezzar, when they said, "We may be in this fire, but I'm not saying the words exactly, but our God will deliver us. But even if He doesn't, we will still serve Him." And I've always hung on to that even if God doesn't bring a particular healing to Monica, He still knows exactly the right course of life for her. I've had different people ask me who are not Christ followers, but know that I am, and they've said, "Do you feel like your faith has helped you with this?" And it's been such a lovely outlet to speak about that to others. The medical staff, they're very curious in many ways, and you spend so many hours with them when you live in a hospital for that much time. You really have the opportunity to get to know them, and they get to know you.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads to my next question. As followers of Christ, how has that influenced or maybe fueled your approach to parenting?
It's always been a struggle from my viewpoint because, I thought, I'm going to be that good parent, and listen to Focus on the Family podcasts and, do all the things you're supposed to do. But it's a challenge to find those specific ways that are individually matched in order to train her up in the way she should go, as opposed to following a 10 things parents should
blueprint.
do.
Yeah. Yeah, the baby books were right out the window. Nothing really worked. But the Holy Spirit has I feel really guided us in the parenting of Monica. She has a unique relationship with Jesus, and
Tell me.
She understands things. She's so perceptive on things that I would never have expected. Monica has a pure understanding that Jesus is always with her, and she will be the first one to remind us of that. If we have something happening medical-wise, she will.
She's comforting you guys.
She does in many ways. Yeah,
Wow.
for sure.
Wow. What has it taught you about God?
We have a more evident reason to give glory to God because of all the trials, and when you come through them, you don't take life for granted as much. You know what I mean?
Things that have happened can only have happened through God's power. It's hard to imagine how can she withstand more?
Right.
Like physically,
Sure.
how can her body handle that more? And God just keeps strengthening her and giving her the strength that she needs physically, but her mental state and her emotional state, she loves life.
Yeah.
And she loves people.
Yeah.
There's more in store for her, and it's evident that God's not done with her here yet.
If there were parents that were facing a similar, just a challenge in parenting, maybe an unexpected, Brian, like you said, we thought it might look like this and it looked very different. What would your advice or maybe a word of wisdom?
One little blanket statement would be that God sees you. God sees you when you are sitting by that hospital bed and nobody else is with you and you don't understand what's going on. God sees you when you're crying behind your closed bedroom door because you don't want your child to hear you and know that you're scared. God sees you when you are trying to balance all of the appointments and the therapy and that pressure and feeling of you've gotta keep going. This is her health. And the other thing that really stands out to me is that God's not only entrusted us with Monica, but God's entrusted us with our story, with her story. He's entrusted us with my story, and he's entrusted us with Ryan's story from his perspective. It's something that I'm still trying to figure out myself. It is, what am I going to do with that story? What am I going to do with this?
Right. He takes all these things and he somehow works them out for good and for his glory. And well, thank you guys so much for sharing your story with us. We love you guys, appreciate you guys. And thank you so much. You know, God's going to use your story and he's going to continue to inspire and encourage people and point people to him. So thank you. Appreciate you.